its end, whatever that is. So I say that correction is the beginning of the journey of living eternity. And really, as far as human beings are concerned, after correction, after the initial conditions are set, it's a journey in eternity, but it's in a living eternity. You see, right now, we as human beings can only grasp eternity in the abstract. It's an abstraction. It boggles the mind. It lies beyond the limits of our conception. But there is a living eternity, which is the eternity that you live in and that lives in you. But we can only reach this as human animals by our bond with the greater planetary mother, because she is an aeon. She is a being of the stature and dimension of the galaxy itself. And so through her correction, we are entering into living eternity.
So that almost sounds like there's a lot of talk of ascension now. So that could almost be described that way, and maybe that's why there's so much talk of that right now.
Well, that could be so. Syntax is extremely important in understanding any act of sorcery, and also in understanding the essential dynamics of the universe. And by syntax, I don't just mean a definition of terms, but a particular intentional use of language. So I don't know. I haven't talked with these people who are talking about ascension. I haven't talked with them personally, so I don't know what their intention of the use of that language is. I don't use that word because for me, the engagement with the wisdom goddess now is not through anything that I would ever call ascension, but much more through immersion. So the correct syntax would be immersion, to become more deeply immersed physically, psychically, emotionally, mentally, cognitively, sexually, in the living dynamics of this planet. That's where it's at. That's what correction is. I'm afraid that the word ascension is a corrupted syntax because it has a long biblical and theological tail on it, and it kind of smacks of going beyond the earth. And even when some people apparently are talking about the earth ascending, well, I don't know what they mean by that. Ascending to what? Ascending to where? So I don't use that syntax myself, and I'm wary of people who do.
Thank you. That actually helps quite a bit, because I get the feeling like there's a vibe. People are picking up the vibe, and they're flailing, trying to find accurate distinctions to go with it.
Well, yes, indeed. And I don't, claim to be the only person here on the planet who's attuned to the event of Sophia's correction. But I do happen to be the one who received the instructions for interactivity for it. So there's a specific way to become interactive with correction. And it's not through meditations, and it's not through ascensions and closing your eyes or visualizing yourself in other dimensions. And it's not through channeled material. And it's not anything, I would add, most important of all in some respects, that can be bought or sold. Planetary Tantra, which is interactive magic with Gaia, cannot be bought or sold. And no genuine spiritual knowledge can ever be sold.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, John. This is Gemini.
Hi, Gemini.
Hello. Will you please discuss how the moon fits into the Sophia story and is not an artificial construct being touted by various researchers? And further, can you discuss the lunar frequencies and how they are tracked as a source of divine instruction?
Well, I guess I could if you want to break out a case of champagne and, let's get out a moldy dip and maybe throw in a few lobsters. I mean, who knows? We could be here for a while. My point being, if that's the conversation we're going to have, that is a conversation that we're going to enjoy.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Sounds great.
First of all, the Sophia myth that I recovered from the Nag Hammadi writings in fragmentary form, and I recovered it and restored it, has some missing parts in it. And one of the missing parts is it doesn't tell how the moon came into being. Now, what kind of a problem is this? Well, it's not really a problem to those of us who are practicing planetary tantra and getting aligned to Gaia Sophia, because living with her in real time and living her story with her empathically and cognitively, we can find out anything we want to know about what happened in the cosmos in some remote time. But we don't find it out by going into psychic meditation or by speculating. We find out how the moon was created, how the moon arose, what is the purpose of the moon in relation to the symbiosis of life on Earth, and anything else we want to know by living inside her story. Because the Sophia myth is the most powerful neuro-linguistic programming tool in the world. And it is the one story that will direct your NLP back to source, because it is a story about source. And so within the story, we have the opportunity now to come to know many things that we didn't know before. And one of them will be about how the moon came into being in this solar system. And I expect that information to be coming to us through her recall in the near future. Now, first of all, the claims that the moon are an artificial construct, I want to address 2 points of that. It is true that when you look at the properties of the moon, they're very extraordinary. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but the most obvious one being that the moon is exactly the same size as the sun, so that when the moon passes in front of the sun during a solar eclipse, it perfectly blocks out the sphere of the sun. That's nothing. If you begin to look even more closely at the dimensions of the moon and the earth and the sun and the relationships of their cycles, you find the most amazing series of internested figures, internested numbers. And the more you look at it, it does genuinely appear as if the moon and the periods of the moon and the size of the moon and the distance of the moon and its relation to the sun has been calculated and computed with very high accuracy. Now, some people and there are also things about the physical properties of the moon that suggest in certain respects that it was even older than the Earth, which is raises a very mysterious issue. So the first point I want to make is that the moon does have these properties, but just because it has what we now would consider to be technically complex properties that we would associate with a complex technological device, what does that say about who designed that device? You know, it's really a lame-ass use of the human imagination to observe these properties and then turn around and jump immediately to the wild conclusion that it could only have been some mastermind technicians from an advanced civilization who put the moon in place and tooled it up with all these precise features. That's a ridiculous jump of the imagination and a very poor use of the imagination. As a matter of fact, if you look at nature on this planet, you'll see that all the processes of nature are calibrated with fantastic precision. They are fractally organized. They reflect the permutations of the Fibonacci series. So what are you going to do? Sit back and say, well, because nature is a fantastic technological achievement of precision in numbers and proportion, it must have been invented by some designing mind of an extraterrestrial. But the fact is that the designing mind that did all this, including the moon, is the mind of Sophia. And when you know that mind and you interact with that mind, you don't have to speculate about some other mind who did it. You're in touch with the origin. You're in touch with the author, creator, and designer of this fantastic technology. So I have to say that the people who are claiming that the moon was an artificial satellite put in place by ETs are really off the track, and in some respects seriously demented. They don't have their attention on nature. They don't have their attention on the realities of the cosmos. And they certainly don't have their attention on the miraculous construction and design of nature. Because all the features of the moon that they claim would be due to extraterrestrial engineering are perfectly achievable by nature. The fractal geometry of nature is absolutely fantastic. And all of the designs of nature, including the biases and the anomalies, bear witness to the designing intelligence of the Earth goddess. So it's all here. The answer is here. They're not paying attention to the Earth. And when you don't pay attention to the Earth, you miss a lot of stuff.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to learning what she can teach us about the moon as she awakens and remembers.
I am too. It's one of the biggest things, a few years ago, it's one of the biggest things on my agenda as a Gaian sorcerer or a Gaian shaman, whatever you want to call it. Well, I said a few years ago, I had a discussion with a young friend who was very gifted in psychonautic affairs and shamanism. We'd been up on Infinity Ridge. In fact, we did the Gaian Tantric vow together up there.
Oh, nice.
And I said to her once, I told her, she said, well, she had studied the Sophia myth very closely. Brilliant girl, 23 years old, from Bulgaria. Absolutely fantastic grasp of the Sophia myth. And she said, well, John, I noticed that, in your nine episode summary of the myth, you didn't say how the moon came into be, what role it has in planetary evolution or whatever. And I said, well, I don't know. But I said to her, I was up on the ridge once, and the subject came up, and I was given to understand that if I spent 3 days up there, I could get it, but it would take 3 days of absolute total concentration. Superhuman concentration without a faltering or a flaw for 3 days, in the organic light. So she said, oh, great. Well, let's go do it. I'll go for you, I'll give you food and water or whatever, So I said, well, that's also, there are other things involved here. I won't go into the gory details, but when a Turton undertakes an investigation like that, your life forces are involved. And it's it can be dangerous in some ways to go that deeply. So anyway, now that's not necessary, because I'm convinced that myself and other people who are following this experience with me are going to have the understanding and the realization about this given to them through their own imaginations as the goddess herself recalls those events. But we can only know what she knows when we live with her in real time. And that is now becoming possible. And one of the ways to practice that is to follow these lunar frequencies. That is, each month at the new moon, a certain one of 16 frequencies of the Gaian intelligence starts to broadcast into the human mind at a subliminal level. And one of the ways to practice planetary tantra is to anticipate those frequencies